Hey you guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it and please cool off. For those of you guys who don't know, and I really hope you guys have heard about this book because it's really good. The Hate You Give is about Star Carter who is kind of in between worlds. She's from a really poor neighborhood, but she goes to a really rich school after watching the death of her best friend at age 10. And now, 6 years later, she goes to a party that ends up with having the cops come, and as she and her friend are leaving, she watches her other best friend die, her unarmed best friend die from a cop, and it kind of tumbles down into what's been going on here. Like, it reflects back to what's been going on in America today, and she finds herself stuck in a situation of wanting to tell the truth, but also realizing there's really bad and big consequences when it comes to telling the truth in terms of how it's going to reflect back onto her family and whatnot. So my first thoughts about this book is that I should have read it when it first came out, but I didn't hear about it until a little later and whatnot. I also thought it was going to be an important read given what it's about, and I thought it was definitely going to open up a lot of conversation that we need, and open up a lot of reading and thinking for those who are of the younger generation, like the books that this is geared to, and kind of how they should be thinking about this now instead of later on in the years when it's kind of affecting them and people around them and all that stuff. So the things that I did like about this book was the family dynamic. Like, normally a lot of YA, you don't see family dynamic at all. Parents get maybe a 16th of the page time that they should, and it's like missing parent syndrome, like, how are you doing this without your parents? But the family dynamic here was so good, and it I don't even know how to explain it. It was just so healthy, and it wasn't very much like, oh no, parents aren't letting me do this, this, and this. They have a very understanding kind of situation going on. The kids are very loving, and the family dynamic is so healthy and not at all what you normally see in a lot of YA. And it was so nice, and the vocabulary and the interactions between the characters and everything else was really natural. Nothing felt forced or felt like it was an adult writing about kids. It felt like it was someone who had been in these shoes, who had been to these communities, and who understands kind of teenagers, which is really rare because sometimes you have authors who don't seem to know how teenagers speak or how they act, and just kind of go with, oh, well, teenagers are kind of dramatic, so we'll just stick with that. And I thought it was just something that I really appreciated reading this book. I didn't want to put it down because it just felt so real to me. Their pain, how much they loved one another, their emotions, it all felt so real and so natural. I also got attached to them really quickly. Probably did not even take me that long for me to get attached to the family members. They'd probably say a sentence and I'd be like, oh, yep, we're gonna love them. I also thought that there was a lot of good examples of kind of white there were a lot of good examples of what it means to be black living in certain communities, and how you do have to change how you talk, you have to change how you hold yourself, what you are able to talk about. And I thought that it was really good to show Star's struggle with being Star from Williamson and Star from her neighborhood, and how she just couldn't find that sweet spot until everything kind of came crashing down, and she didn't have a choice but to be the person that she was always supposed to be, and that she has to find some kind of medium. They have both worlds have to meet, and she can't keep this separated for very longer. I thought that some of the characters were really good examples of a lot of things. Haley was definitely a really good example of internalized. Yikes. I thought that she was an example of internalized racism. She didn't realize a lot of the things that she was saying and doing were harmful or hurtful, but it has been ingrained in her in such a way that she doesn't know how to do anything else. She doesn't understand that she is hurting the people she cares about or cares about. She doesn't realize that what she is saying isn't the best. She doesn't realize that a lot of the stuff that she believes in is just very one-sided. She doesn't get that. And she also shows the side of that where she doesn't want to really learn about it. She doesn't want to show that she's capable of learning. She wants everything to stay the same and has a hard time realizing when things are different and when things are meant to change and how she should change with them rather than staying put in this weird little bubble of hers. Chris, who is Star's boyfriend, is there was some white guilt with him, like you can sense it, you can feel it, but it's also, I think, a very stark contrast to Haley. I thought that while there was some white guilt there, he was the voice where he showed Star that it's okay to have different lives, it's okay for these things to meet, and he was also a really good voice for Haley to kind of understand that she doesn't have to be two different people, she can just be herself around them, and he'll accept her regardless. And he was very supportive. Like, he had moments where you could just tell he was a complete and total asshole, but he came to terms with the fact that, hey, he is an asshole, and he was supportive of the fact that she needed certain things at the time, and he was going to be there for her regardless of it being dangerous for him or it being not what he is used to. And he was very, what's the word? He wasn't afraid to kind of be there for her and everything, which I thought was a really good thing to show, just because we have this internalized racism and all that stuff, but we also have the side where it is very understanding and very not biased, and we got to see how well, I don't want to say like not everyone thinks this way, and change is possible for people who are kind of in that privileged position. So I really liked him. I thought that he was such a good character, such a good like person to be around Star. He doesn't take advantage of her in any way, shape, or form, and he's just a very good kid, I feel. There was also a lot of emotion behind everything, which is saying something because this is a very emotional book, but the emotions, like I said before, didn't feel forced. They didn't feel like she had to formulate them in any funny way. They were just there, and you could really tell kind of the emotions behind it were genuine and they were raw. They were so unfiltered, and I just loved it so much. I feel Star is exactly the kind of narrator we need for this novel, because we get to see kind of a sneak peek on her neighborhood and kind of how this circle of violence continues with their own, like within the neighborhood and with outside of the neighborhood and everything, as well as seeing how these things, this sense of violence that goes on between everyone doesn't affect everyone the same way that it should. The people who are privileged don't see it, and they never will understand it, and they use it for their own gain, for their own best interests, however they want to do it. And it's like a horror that they'll never understand. They'll never be able to really comprehend. All they know is it's just something they see behind a screen. It's a protest they walk in to skip class, and it's not necessarily something that they will ever ever have to be forced to face the same way that Star and her siblings will have to be. I also liked how it was a very uncensored read. I felt that it shows you the true horrors of what's going on and what it's like to be hurt this way, and it's not like an individual pain within like the family. It's a communal pain. Yes. But you see the pain as a community as a whole. You see how it affects everyone, and not just beyond them getting hurt, or Khalil, the guy his friend who got shot, how his death affected everyone, but how it affected his friends and family, but how it affected everyone. I also like the fact that it showed how the media twists things to kind of fit their narrative. It shows not only in a sense that like you can't trust the media, but it shows kind of how we as a people, as a generation, have to start actively critiquing the information that is given to us from these biased media shows, and how we should probably come to the understanding that not everything that we see or read is exactly the truth, and that there are going to be multiple sides to the story, and we have to decide that maybe the side where we see is like what we have been fed as good isn't good at all. I also liked how it wasn't a happy ending. It was a very upsetting read towards the end, because I was hoping for a happy ending, but I like the fact that it didn't glaze over how these cases aren't won, which is very upsetting as a reality. It shows that not everything that not everything is is easy. You just don't change things right off the bat, but it's possible. It'll just take some time. It just means that you can't necessarily, like, for situations like what happens to Star and what happens to everyone else, to everyone who has been affected by police brutality towards African Americans, you can't give up. There's just a lot of messages and themes that I think people need to hear and read during a time like this, and I really like the fact that the story gave us all of those in such a short amount of time. As for things I didn't like, I felt that sometimes certain plot points or certain scenes didn't fit or necessarily feel necessary to the overall development. There were some moments where it would be really serious one second, and then it flipped to a really happy moment, and it kind of took me by surprise, and I didn't understand what was going on, and it was kind of jarring. I had to like pause for a second and like reread the first couple of pages of the chapter to be like, oh, we're in a different scene, different time period and whatnot, and we didn't like really get that hint. We were just kind of told, or we had to pick it up. I feel the ending got a little corny. Not so much in terms of like how the characters react and everything, but kind of how it was formatted. We got a list of all the people, all the African Americans that have been shown on TV who have been killed, which I appreciated, but I feel like considering it was towards the end and whatnot, it felt like kind of a odd movie moment where you get all these like lists and then just kind of tell how they can't give up and everything, which I appreciated, but at the same time I was just like, it took me out of the overall story and kind of didn't wrap up the story for me. It just kind of gave me an overarching thing telling me, hey, this is what's going on and we can't give up, which I appreciated, and I think is also really an interesting thing to end a novel with. But I feel like given how everything kind of ended with the plot and everything, the list and kind of the overarching message could have been depicted a little better, if that makes sense. Overall, I would give this a 5 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it to everyone. I feel like it's an important read, and I couldn't bring myself to put it down. It has to be something you have to have on your list at least once. And even if you don't read it, even if you don't like it, you can always suggest it to friends who might need some more eye-opening reads, some more like actual contemporary reads that aren't just romance and are based in the reality that America is in today. So I would definitely recommend this to anyone who is willing to give these emotions a go. But other than that, that is it for my tea talk about The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is becoming a movie, and I'm so excited because I need to see these characters come to life. I need to know how they're gonna put this really uncensored read onto the screen, and I'm just really excited for that. But yeah. If you guys have any thoughts that are like mine, or you maybe want to discuss this a bit more, leave them in the comments below. Other than that, hit like and subscribe. I try to upload every Saturday and Tuesday, but sometimes it'll change depending on my work schedule and school schedule and whatnot. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.